Morning, Muttonistas. It is 6 in the morning. Not often you see me up at this time in the morning, unless of course I've had a very late one. Anyway, I'm off to the airport in Madrid. Been in Spain for a week and a bit now. Very much enjoyed going to the Bernabeu for the game between Real Madrid and City. But now I'm off. But I'm not off back to the UK. I'm off on a long-haul adventure. So come and join me as I fly with Qatar Airways, the world's greatest airline in my opinion, to the Far East. It's been a very comfortable stay in the hotel I've been in, the Ilunion Suites, and as you can see, I don't and can't travel light. I've got all my camera equipment and day-to-day necessities which I need to pack in my hand baggage. I have sleep apnea, so I have a sleep machine and an enormous case because by the time I get back to Manchester, it'll have been a month away. Right, enough messing about. Time to get a taxi to the airport. The journey time to the airport was about 15 minutes. I departed from Terminal 4, which is Iberia's main terminal, in fact the newest terminal at Madrid Airport, and by far the best to use. And check-in was relatively straightforward, which was a surprise given how busy the airport was. Well, there is an absolutely horrendous queue for security here, but fortunately my business class ticket, and even if I didn't have a business class ticket, my status would get me through the fast track lane, which is an absolute godsend. The fast track lane can also be used by Amex premium holders, along with of course anybody with One World status, as all the One World carriers depart from this terminal. Schengen flights depart from the main area of Terminal 4, however, if you're travelling outside the Schengen area, you need to head off on the little shuttle train that takes you to T4S, the satellite terminal. The shuttle trains are reasonably frequent, so don't worry if you miss one. And while the authorities don't really like you doing it, the lift is the fastest way to get up and down if you're in a hurry. And that applies at both ends, whether you're departing or arriving. Immigration was very swift, so I'm glad I didn't have to hang around there much. With two separate lanes, one for Schengen passport holders and one for non-Schengen. And rather bizarrely, the Iberia Business Lounge is located in the middle of the duty-free store. I don't think I've seen that anywhere else before. And I really do like Iberia's lounges in Madrid. They're airy and spacious, they have a great selection of refreshments, alcoholic, non-alcoholic drinks, and really good food supplied by Doe & Co, who are probably the best airline caterers in the world. Not the hugest selection, but what there was pretty good and more than enough to satisfy me for my breakfast. And of course the Spaniards are not that big on breakfast, so you won't be surprised to hear that their best stuff comes out during the day, especially for lunch. Now then, Muttonistas, there are yellow and dark stripes over my face because I'm sitting in front of blinds because I want to see the aircraft apron. Anyway, I use this lounge quite a lot. It's really good, the food's good, but it's actually the first time I've been here at breakfast time. I hate the queues and the early morning dash, so when I can, I do go in the afternoon. Iberia has two lounges in Terminal 4, the Dali Lounge in the main Schengen terminal and the Velasquez Lounge in the satellite terminal where the non-Schengen and long-haul flights go from. Now, you get an awful lot of food and drink on Qatar Airways. When you're flying in business class, you get dine on demand. You can eat as many times as you want, as long as they still have some of the dishes left. Anyway, I haven't had any breakfast yet, and whilst I'm partial to a continental breakfast, I did like the look of those scrambled eggs. So scrambled eggs, chicken sausages, grilled tomato, pastries and yoghurt. And of course an espresso, the obligatory espresso. I could have got alcohol, they have a well-stocked bar there, but I mean it's way too early in the morning to be drinking. Anyway, Muttonistas, I am going to get on with this, and I will see you when it's boarding time. Well, there were separate lanes for boarding for business class passengers and economy class passengers, something I've rarely seen, partitioned lanes to walk to the aircraft doors. A separate door, of course, for the business class. Today's aircraft was a 787-9 Dreamliner, not as good as their A350s or 777s, which do have these wonderful enclosed queue suites, your own cocoon as it were on board, but still, these seats are better than nearly any other airline out there. And I spotted an outrageously good rosé champagne available as a welcome drink. Well, Muttonistas, I told you I wasn't going to drink this early. Looks like I've sold you yet another whopper. When I saw Laurent Perrier Rosé on the menu as the pre-flight rosé champagne, I couldn't resist it. Muttonistas, the expert aviation plumbers all give you a little seat door, so I will do exactly the same. Probably not as well as they do, but anyway. And you'll see later how exactly this seat turns into a flat bed to get a good sleep on board these aircraft. You get a massive screen here which has tons and tons of features, whether it be films, maps, religious material. And you might be a little bit surprised to hear that I do actually like classical Arabian music, even though I don't understand a word of it. It's really bluesy and I love the melodies. As I said, you get served an awful lot of food on these flights. And even with a belly like mine, you don't have to worry about the table digging into your stomach, and what an enormous table it is as well. In-seat power supply. And I think down there, yep, if you want to use a plug rather than just a cable. A remote control, stowage space for water and electronics. So, it does feel like time for more refreshment. Well, you know what they say, try and stick to the hours of the destination rather than the origin. So even though it's 9:40 in the morning Madrid time, could be time for another quick slurp. Given that I had just had that breakfast in the lounge, I'm just going to have a little snack now. I'll have a main meal towards the end of the flight. Food and the wine list is incredibly extensive, so I'm going to silently, or with a bit of music, take you through the whole menu, because it would take me too long to talk you through it, dish by dish, wine by wine. But I will point to the wines that I quite fancy. I thought it would be appropriate, just for quality control purposes and to make sure you all know how it tastes, to try the white champagne or the brut champagne. Now that's pretty good as well, but the rosé has it, and I actually know that that rosé champagne is one of the top rosé champagnes in the whole of France. Right, Muttonistas, my snack has arrived, as has my glass of Bordeaux, so a quick slurp to get us going. And I've just gone for something small, a beef sandwich with tomato and pepper inside, and a yoghurt dip, but because I like a bit of oomph, or a bit of a kick, I've added some mustard as well. A Mutton with the mustard. Now that wine is a really good wine, it's a very fine Bordeaux. The only thing I'd say is that when you're in the air, your taste buds are not as sharp as they normally are. So going for the fuller bodied wines is always a good idea, as is going for a stronger flavoured dish. When I have my full-on lunch later towards the end of flight, I'll probably be going for the Qatari dish, because whilst they had a beef fillet on board, first of all they have to cook it in ovens, and it tends to be a little dry and overdone. And the other thing is, of course, you can't taste it that well. I always actually go for a curry if they have one, or a slow-cooked meat dish. Anyway, I'll get on with this, and then I'll have a little nap and show you how the seat converts into a flat bed before I actually use it and have a nap. And I might add that the wine has been served at a great temperature. In the past, often on Qatar Airways, whilst the wines have always been of very high quality, there's a bit of a problem in that the staff who serve it usually don't drink themselves, so they have no idea at which temperature to serve it. Obviously somebody in the management department has managed to tell people they can't have these things sitting around on a hot plane boiling away. Down here to the left is the seat control, with almost as many positions as in the Kama Sutra, but this is the one we want here to turn the seat into a flat bed. Muttonistas, I'm back again. I've had about a 2 hours sleep and I feel pretty refreshed after that. So, I was going to talk about football in this video, and I will do that when we get to Doha, because I've got a very special lounge to show you. But before that, let's get down to the serious business of having a full lunch. And just to wake us up, I've ordered an espresso and some water. And I do like it when airlines provide proper espresso and have the proper machines instead of just serving you American-style coffee. And any meal you get served on Qatar Airways is a very elaborate affair. Take a look at this, Muttonistas. Pepper, salt, butter, olive oil, 3 types of bread, and a little prawn amuse-bouche. And I also just noticed that the salt is the premium pink Himalayan salt. So those of you who watched me fiddling around with the menu would have seen I pointed to the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. I've had this before many times on this airline. It comes and goes off the wine list, but one thing I remember is that it tastes great and especially good at altitude. Ooh, I do love an amuse-bouche, don't you? Next course up, Muttonistas, and given we're on an Arab airline, I had to go for the Middle Eastern dish. I've gone for the Arabic meze. It's a favourite of mine, frequently served on Qatar Airways, and it never disappoints. Down to the table. We have muamara, which is a spicy walnut paste, or maybe it's a different nut, I think it's walnut. We have hummus, made from chickpeas, I'm sure you're all familiar with that, and tabbouleh, a cracked wheat salad with bits of bulgur and tomato in it. And that lemon is there for a reason, so squeeze away we shall. All that squeezing is thirsty work, Muttonistas, so we better have a quick slurp before we embark upon our starter. As always, these dips cannot be served without flatbreads. Quite nutty, quite tomatoey, and a little bit spicy. Better quickly cleanse the palate before we move on to the hummus. And finally the tabbouleh, one of Lebanon's finest salads. All delicious, fresh, tasty and moist. I mean, hummus in the best of places can be a bit dry sometimes if it's not done properly, but that was right on the money. Now, it has to be said, cold food is a lot easier for airlines to get right. It's the hot stuff that's difficult. This is why, for the mains, I've plumped for the Qatari-style rice dish. Now, the name of this dish is Qatari-style mashroom prawns with daku sauce. Sorry if I butchered the pronunciation. The stewardess offered me some Tabasco sauce. I don't know if that's actually going to be necessary, but this is going to be, well, not quite a first for me, but one of the few times I've tried this style of cuisine. I tend to only have it on aircraft, and I do know Gulf does specialise in rice dishes. There appears to be grated onions, sultanas and almonds on top of the rice as well. Don't think that needs Tabasco. It's slightly spicy, not very spicy, but very flavoursome. Would I be a little bit unkind if I called it like a Gulf-style biryani? No, I don't think it would be being too unkind. Really enjoying this. Glad I chose this dish. Quick slurp. In fact, I think I'd better get some reinforcements in. Anyway, I'll get on with this and I will see you for landing after I've polished this off. Now, one thing is Muttonistas. As tasty as that was and as delicious as the wine is, you can't overdo it on these planes too much because you don't really want to be so drunk. And also, you want to keep some stomach space for what you get on the ground as well. Good God, this is painfully hot. But thankfully the transit bus has Arctic air conditioning. That's what the crowd likes to see. Okay, there's usually a transit security check now. I do have quite a long layover, so once we're over that security check, it'll be straight to the lounge for further refreshment. Well, that was swift and relatively painless. Just a few things about when I fly. You might wonder, oh, why have I got all this hand baggage and what have you? First of all, I have to carry a sleep apnea machine because I suffer from sleep apnea. I cannot let it out of my sight. Secondly, I want most of my electronics with me, my cameras and my leads, and even my phone chargers. I mean, if your suitcase gets lost, what are you going to do? And I always bring one or two extra changes of clothes, one to freshen up in the middle of a long journey, and the second one, again, in case my bag gets mishandled at the other end. Some of you watching this will say, oh, look how he's flying, he's loaded. No, I'm not loaded. I actually used air miles to buy this trip. And because I've done that, it's left me with a long layover of 6 or 7 hours. No, make that 7 or 8, I miscalculated. Well, for those who like to shop, this airport's got a ton of things, but I'm more into abusing the lounges myself. And I've never understood why they have this big teddy bear in the middle of Doha Airport, but it seems to be a bit of an attraction, so many people filming it. Anyway, I'm going to head to the lounge for further refreshment, and I'm going to have to do some video work because when I get to my final destination, which is China, I'm not going to have very much time. Tonight I only go as far as Korea because getting to China was a bit awkward in terms of basically them still being on COVID mode in terms of the fares, which were absolutely ridiculous. The business class lounge at Doha is something else, but this is different gravy, the first class lounge called the Al Safwa Lounge. Dining a la carte, high quality wines, duty free shopping basically delivered to your seat, a business centre, and even rooms which are akin to hotel rooms available. And unlike the business lounge, it really doesn't ever get too crowded. When the peak waves of flights are coming in and out, the business lounge can get pretty rammed, and for the restaurant area, you often have to wait for a table. I'm going to come first to the part of the lounge that's not even busy by this quiet lounger standard, the bakery and sushi bar. So Muttonistas, this place is vast, it's criminally underused, just first class ticket holders, and they hardly have any first class seats, only on the 380s, plus some flights designated as first class within the Gulf, plus people like me in business class with Qatar Emerald cards. Anyway, I am going to have a little bit of sushi to keep me going. I'm not really hungry at the moment. And then finally, God knows how many minutes into this video, I'll start talking about football. Okay, 2 bureaucratic tasks attempted, 0 completed. Lovely. I'm going to have to do these when I arrive in Korea after my next long flight. Anyway, as promised, time for the good stuff and to talk about football. Right, back at the crease again. So some of you may be wondering what I'm actually doing here in the first place, and I am having to work in China for a couple of weeks. I'm changing in Doha here in Qatar and in Korea because the flights to China were crazy expensive, and it means I'm going to miss quite a few football games. Now, just to go back, some further thoughts on the game in Madrid. When I look back at it, it was more of an even game than I thought. I thought Madrid had edged it and had the more dangerous chances, but I think my memory was being a bit selective and I forget the early possession and chances that City had. For the return leg, well, having drawn most of our away legs and won every single home leg, reasons to be confident. Madrid have looked a bit iffy away. The only caveat here is that Madrid have spent the last couple of months basically planning for the Champions League. I think they've thrown a sponge in the league, certainly within the last month. So I expect in the return leg, for which sadly I've had to sell my ticket, a tough game like against Bayern. The worry is that Real Madrid are better at putting away their chances. But if we play as well as we did against Bayern, I think we'll be all right. Careful positioning of our fullbacks, whoever that happens to be. I don't know whether Ake is coming back for that game. And Real's tactic was very clear for all to see, to send long cross-field balls over to their pacey wingers. So if we cut that out, I think we'll be all right. So a hard game on Tuesday and a even harder game next Wednesday. That segues on to the weekend fixture away at Everton. I think this is the banana skin, this is the tricky one, simply because it comes between those two games. And in fact, this is a problem that English teams seem to always face at the business end of European competition, that they are battling hard either to try and win the league or to get into the top 4 or some European place. Something that Real Madrid usually don't have to worry about. They've usually won the league, or they're usually second behind Barcelona, and they can put all their eggs in one basket. So this Everton game could be a real toughie. They're fighting for their lives at the bottom of the league, and what a result they just had away at Brighton. I did not see that coming at all. Newcastle's failure to get anything from Arsenal has complicated things. Had they got something, Pep could have rested a few players. He will anyway, but he could have rested more of the big hitters. And for me, dearly as much as I'd like to win the Champions League, 3 leagues in a row is a big, big deal. And for me, that is the number one priority. It's your bread and butter. It's the test of how well you do over a whole season. We can afford a slip-up or two draws, but obviously if we can get this result through on Sunday against what is admittedly a poor team but a motivated team, I think we'll be all right for the league. The game after our second game against Madrid will be at home to Chelsea, who are on the most appalling run apart from their one recent victory. So I think if we can beat Everton, we can go into those two away games at the end of the season, Brighton and Brentford, needing one win or two draws. I think if we get to that stage, we're as good as home and hosed. In the FA Cup, the last game of the domestic season, we faced Manchester United. Anything could happen there. We're obviously a much better team than they are, but derbies are always dangerous. But if you remember how we hosed them 6-3 earlier in the season and only lost to them at Old Trafford because of a highly contentious goal, reasons to be confident there as well. So it's an exciting time to be a City fan, but unfortunately, as I said, because I'm working away, and I will be watching as many games as I can, even if I have to get up at 3 in the morning to watch them. But I will be going to one more game this season, which is the FA Cup final. I can make that. I'm devastated that if we get to the Champions League final, I'm not going to be able to go. I have to work somewhere in Europe that weekend. I even have a hotel booked, which I need to cancel for that. Now, in case you think I'm having all this food and drink on top of each other, that's not the case. This is quite a long layover, 7 or 8 hours, so I'm going to have dinner here a bit later. It might look as if I'm having it immediately afterwards because I'm not going to leave such a pause, obviously, in my video. But it's worth sticking around for because it's some top-notch food with some really good wines, which, of course, taste a lot better on the ground. So I'll be back with you in a few ticks. Okay, Muttonistas, we are going to wrap the vlog up with dinner in the lounge. Now, having bigged this lounge up, everything about it is still very, very good, with one exception. The accountants have slashed and burned the wine list, so instead of 250 quid bottles of wine, they are now 40 to 50 quid bottles, and in some cases, especially with the whites, 10 to 15 pound bottles of whites. That is some change, although it might have something to do with the World Cup and them having to mass stop with so many passengers passing through. I don't know. One thing I will say, though, is that the food offering is more comprehensive. Anyway, we're going to start off with our aperitif as usual, a glass of champagne. I tried the rosé earlier, so it would be rude not to try the Brut. Yeah, it's Laurent Perrier, decent, solid, but not what I had in 2021 when I was here. But what is pretty odd is that the food offering is more comprehensive. One thing I have to add here is they're a little bit guilty of not making the white wine and champagne cold enough. I know that some places they make it too cold, but here they've gone the other way. The red wine, on the cusp, it's okay. I'd like it slightly colder, but for a lot of people it would be perfect. A little something to keep us going here. Some pesto tapenade, that's an unusual combination. Some cream cheese on bread and, well, butter, as per usual. And if you prefer it, they offer you like 101 different types of olive oil to dip your bread in if you so wish. Okay, the starters arrived and it looks a bit fancy. Scallops with a little bit of green asparagus, and I think this is called gochujang butter, so something Korean, obviously. And some salmon, caviar and truffle shavings. Now, as I said, when I was here a year ago, the food wasn't as good as this, but the wine was a ton better. I just wish I could get both at the same time. So a great start, those scallops fresh and firm, not at all rubbery, which is a way of telling whether you're getting fresh kit or not. And now, in anticipation of the mains, we are on to the Bordeaux, the Chateau Bataille Pouillac 2015. Seen it on a lot of aircraft, and of course in a lot of lounges. Good solid Bordeaux, retails at about 50 quid a bottle. Now, I asked for the steak, which is a Wagyu steak. That's why I went for it, because obviously halal steaks have a little less flavour, and they couldn't do it rare. Medium rare was the rarest they could get it. And I'm going to hazard a guess, my version of medium rare is not the same as theirs. Well, there was quite a lot of juice coming out of that. I would call that medium well myself, but obviously I take an extremist point of view on all this. Very good beef, very good beef. In fact, Muttonistas, that beef is so good, I'm tempted to have one for dessert. But we do have a bit of a crisis here. I've sent for the emergency services. Let's hope they arrive pretty soon. Oh, and man, to have had that last year with those 250 quid bottles of French wine that they were dishing up there. Oh, we'll have a quick slurp and then I'll polish off the dish and I'll get back to you for the dessert. Cheese plate has arrived. Very interesting selection. Red Leicester, which I would never have chosen. I think they have Gorgonzola here, a Brie, and I think a Gouda. And how remiss of me, Muttonistas, a goat's cheese as well. Yeah, that's exactly the one, thank you. Also, very, very impressed to see figs and walnuts. Those are the two best things you can have with cheese. Okay, dried apricots are not too bad. And also bread instead of crackers. I think crackers are fine, but bread is better. Now then, to accompany the cheese, I've gone for the Newport 20-year-old tawny port. When my friend Richard, who sadly passed away, joined me in Porto, I was delighted to be able to share in his expertise on port. It really was his favourite drink. And it was a drink I didn't know much about, but I quickly realised that this producer, Newport, was absolutely the best of all I tried. I'm going to have another one of those. Now, whilst the accountants have done a job on the wine, they forgot the port. It's still as good as ever. So anyway, some of you watching this video will know of Richard or know him personally, so I raise a glass of his favourite beverage to Richard Baldry. Anyway, Muttonistas, I am going to wrap the video up here. I'm enjoying this so much. I'm going to have to love you and leave you. I will post some photos on my social media of the beloved Q Suite, which I think I'm getting on the next flight. Or even better, how about a little video clip or two? I have to say, this is the bee's knees to dog's bollocks. It's a better product than most airlines have in their first class cabin. Sadly, my next football game is the FA Cup final on June the 3rd between Manchester City and Manchester United. Very sorry I can't bring you coverage of anything before then, but I hope you enjoyed this completely gratuitous video of eating, drinking, larging it up on aircraft, chatting about football in possibly a biased way towards Manchester City. But keep subscribing, keep liking, keep sharing, keep telling your friends about me. But most of all, don't forget, you can't beat a bit of mutton.